Hello, good morning, good afternoon, welcome. This is what date? June 5th, I think? June 5th. And the garden is burgeoning with blooms. It's just entering its peak. So people should begin to come every 3 days if they want to catch everything at its prime as things change. We've counted more than 190 of the 230 plants are going to bloom this year. So we're moving toward complete bloom, and that's fabulous. And we have 212 different varieties, absolutely different from each other, unique, each one of them, out of the 230. So we only have a few duplicates, and those are intentional for favorite flowers or flowers that are gifts of the Reinhardt family, or in honor of the Reinhardt family, let's say that. So today would be fun to kind of review and renew. Here's seed pods I was just going to show. Already this was a plant that bloomed a couple weeks ago. It's one of our early plants, and we have pictures of blooms online on Facebook, facebook.com/Reinhardt Peony Garden. That's a great way to get to a daily look at what can be in every spot, in every space. But these seed pods are what get fed by the pollen, and bees take pollen from every plant in the whole garden. So these, who knows what these would be as seedlings, but it's the miracle of this garden. I'm going to show how some of the plants that are not supposed to be taller than 36 inches are getting very ambitious in this garden. And it's partly how they're cared for and fed and fertilized, but it's also how they are receiving sun from Mount Sentinel. We've decided Mount Sentinel is serving as a solar panel for this garden. So the garden gets really an advance in the spring from those extra heat, what do you call them, thermals, that slip into the garden overnight. So let's look at some different things. Already we started with singles, and I showed you some seed pods. That was a single flower. But we're moving now into doubles, and the tree peonies and the itos are just getting ready to burst, and I'm going to explain and review a little bit about that. Maybe we're going to go over here to promenade. We won't go in garden order exactly because time is short, and Ron will help us. Oh, this is new today. Ta-da! Just today opening up. Scarlet Heaven. And we have labels for every plant. We've gotten that all updated. This plant was hybridized, registered in 1999, Scarlet Heaven. And if I look on my definite list, I could find out if it's a single or a double or a semi-double. It looks pretty simple right now, but it hasn't fully opened. It's just brand new today. This is Scarlet O'Hara. So we had Scarlet Heaven, and now here's Scarlet O'Hara. And this is also a simple, you could say, or a single peony. It has a gorgeous color. I'm using my yardstick to show the beautiful bloom, the beautiful red, scarlet color. So scarlet's the perfect name for that. And here are buds just getting ready. And last year there were maybe 2 or 3 flowers, blooms per stem. Here's a bee getting excited. So the buds that are going to come out in the next couple of weeks, few days I should say, in a couple of weeks this will be finished. So they should be enjoyed each day that people can come and enjoy what's opening today. What's happening at the Reinhardt Peony Garden. So this plant was a favorite last year among people, but it only had a few blooms last year. And this year it has a whole bouquet. And this is Promenade, and it's an herbaceous peony. Today we're going to review a little bit their types. An herbaceous peony has foliage, which comes up like little asparagus shoots in the spring, and they die back in the fall to the ground, and then it goes into its dormancy. And peonies must have cold. They must have the winter to, you could say, hibernate and get ready for next year. So here's already some seed pods from a bloom. They come pretty fast, and they will get deadheaded in a bit. But these blooms are singles, and they're beautiful. Just to see the size of a hand next to the flower, it's amazing. But they're just really, they're not delicate, but they're graceful, maybe is a good word. And there's the pollen, stamens, and the pistil is what I call it, stamens and pistil, but I'm not sure about seed pod is a good word. And they often are just three. You know, there's symmetry in flowers, but three seems to be one of the ways flowers have adapted instead of 2 or 4 or 6 or 8. So that's kind of interesting. But these are single petals that this year make a bouquet. And this foliage here is fabulous because it is unique. And people last year just couldn't believe that this was a peony. I think we used to say peony on the farm in South Dakota, but I sort of have adapted to a generalized concurrence that we say peony. Here's more seed pods. This was very early. This was May 14th, I believe. It had its first blooms. And it's sort of fun when it has a month later, or almost a month later, still one more single bloom. So here's that single, just the guard petals, gentle, keeping the bud and everything protected, and then the stamens and the pistils are inside as it opens up. We have a lot of interesting things happening. Our first double, we're still in herbaceous peonies, by the way. These die back as well. These are fernleaf peonies are kind of original. This is probably the first generation of one of the species peonies, species meaning ancient, forever, unadulterated, non-hybridized originals like dandelions are species. They just bloom and keep making more dandelions, we know that. And same with peonies in a way, in that they, from their same root, they come up every year, perennials. And this fernleaf is just a beautiful quality that goes way, way back, and we'll see one of the parents of these hybrids. This is coming to an end now, but beautiful flower. I'm just using my little yardstick here. Mary Mayshine. This is one of Gary Clark's favorites. He's on our committee. And this, yes, is just another beautiful red. And the red, you know, each color of each peony is whatever it is. It's not like everything says, okay, well, I'll be red. There are all these shades and variations. Our first double, another herbaceous peony over here, meaning that it dies back every year. This is sort of the normal peony, but these are not normal blooms. This is Salmon Beauty, and it was the first double to bloom last year. And double means the flower is very, very advanced. And the advance is that the pollen, if there is any pollen in there anywhere, has, some plants don't, actually they're sort of sterile, but they've hybridized to where the double peony means that there are no longer those stamens. There are now petals in the, you can't even distinguish between the inside of the flower and the guard petals. It's all unified. The colors might change a little bit, and this particular flower opens up as very much salmon colored, and it fades to this lovely kind of lighter. It's just a glorious flower. First to bloom of the doubles this year and last year as well, so we know pretty much that that is a plant to follow each year. Tells us the weather. It's the barometer for our season. So here we are now we're moving into several tree peonies in a row. I'm going to point over there, and here, and here, and here, and one more that's brand new, that's going to actually bloom in a couple of weeks. That little baby over there is already happy to try and make a little bloom in its first year. So, and tree peonies that are best are tree peonies that come from the same root. In other words, apple trees are grafted to some kind of crabapple root or something, and because those roots are really strong. But you really want to get a tree peony, if you can, that has its own root, and otherwise you get little suckers that come up from the old, just like rose bushes, for example. But these are all trees in this garden, and they will, if not get really tall, they will be sort of majestic. And this is the last bloom of, you could walk in if you want, the last bloom of Ezra Pound. And it's had several flowers, and they are, this one isn't even as enormous, being the last bloom of the season, but even so you can see with my hand that it's bigger than a hand. The biggest ones were like the size of 2 hands, hand and a half, sort of like measuring horses. This one, Shimonashiki, A tree peony has this unique foliage. This is the foliage of a tree peony. It's a little more pointy and more like a tree almost. Here's the leaf of like maple leaves or oak leaves or whatever. So the leaves are very distinct, and the trunks of the tree peonies they never die back. Each year the new growth will come out of last year's bark that's forming, and then the bark and the trunk sort of hang in there for over the winter, and eyes are at the end of the tree trunk, just like in a sapling or in a tree. You get the buds coming out every spring, and so the new leaves come up, and this is a beautiful, oftentimes my estimation, these, I don't know what this will be, the classification, it's more complex than just a single flower, but tree, maybe it's just a tree flower. To me, they're always a little bit more like crepe paper. They have a look like somebody made them out of crepe paper and Kleenex, and you know, they don't look artificial, but they just have a distinct quality. So Ezra Pound's a little more, it's more ruffled in a way on the end of the petals like this one, but it doesn't have maybe quite the crepe paper texture. We're also getting, I'm trying not to hit this is the first year for Shimodajin. And Shimodajin, and I can't tell you why these names are what they are. Sounds maybe more Japanese than Chinese, but it's another tree. And this is the first year for blooming. So that's a really pretty flower if you wanted to get, maybe come around into the light there. And that's Shimodajin, another tree, but the tree will be bigger next year. Last year it didn't bloom at all. It was just making itself known. Here we have another interesting herbaceous peony. This is maybe our second or third or whatever double, because they all kind of pop out at once they start coming. This is such a beautiful color, and it's therefore the color of sun, yellow. And Sunny Girl is a good name for this herbaceous peony. And this is let me look, it's maybe a semi-double, but it's at least in the direction of a double peony, which are the most intricate, normal garden variety, much beloved blooms. The double blooms are very strong and very appealing and very often very fragrant in terms of how things happen. So now we've seen herbaceous peonies, and they have each their own distinct foliage and their own kind of growth patterns. Some of them need more support than others, and we try to find that, so we're busy making sure there are supports for the peonies. So especially as they bloom, everybody knows the blooms get huge, and if you get a rainstorm, they just lie down on the ground, because even strong stems, you know, have a limit to, they don't break, but they sort of bow with the weight. This will come out in a couple days. This is called Carnation Bouquet. And it's another herbaceous peony, another beautiful set of leaves. And last year there were 1 or 2 blooms. Now we have a bouquet, literally. And the flowers, when they open, you just think you're looking at a carnation until you see that a carnation is the size of your fingernail, sort of. And this is going to be the size of my hand when it finishes. So that's really remarkable. I brought my yardstick today because this plant is supposed to get 48 inches tall at the most, and I measured it with a true measurement this morning. It's 54 inches right now. I think it's reached its max for the year. But last year, this fun thing is that last year wasn't any taller than this little guy. And so now it's made its way. It's at home in the Reinhardt Peony garden. So it's outdoing itself. We don't necessarily want it to. I had to tie these guys up because they were going to just lean over. So we're trying to make sure that they get nicely displayed and stabilized and safe. And here we have now another tree, Gauguin. And Gauguin is a great artist. And the colors that Gauguin would use were, you know, in the pastel range, you could say. And the art itself was very tasteful and unique and impressive and all of that. And so I'm not trying to be an art history guy, but just looking at the colors of these petals. This is a tree peony. Again, the roots are And I think it's not grafted. I think it's got its own root down underneath, and you can see underneath, well, not so much yet. It's just barely making its trunk. So it's coming into its own this year. Last year, I think we got one little puny bloom. So now it's going to have many more over the next week or so that will come. So here we have tree, and here we have a tall herbaceous, the tallest one in the garden, supposedly. We have one over here that is approaching it. And this one should be no more than 36 inches, so it's fully healthy this year. Henry Boxtos. Has great blooms. There's only 4, so choose your day and come over and keep coming if you can. And every few days see what's going on. Again, 212 different kinds, different varieties, different unique names. And some of them have years. Some of them are unknown the year because of whatever, that they just became so established, but nobody could really trace the history of them. But good hybridizers of the 6,700 types and growing numbers of peonies that are registered, they're very careful about. They have to be vetted, and lots of information. So we have here, this now is an Ito, I believe. Yes, there's no, look down there, there's no tree trunk. So in Ito, this is a miracle plant, and they are so vibrant and vigorous and strong and resistant to almost any problems. They are the result of a hybrid in 1948, finally, after thousands of failed attempts to try and get the pollen, or whichever order they did it, the pollen from a tree to cross-fertilize into the pistil or the seed pods of the herbaceous peony was an impossible task. It failed and it failed and it failed. In 1948, finally only seven out after thousands of tries, little seedlings came up out of the effort of making a tree peony, this being a tree, combined with any of these herbaceous peonies. And so we got what's called an Ito because it was Toichi Ito in 1948 who succeeded post-war. And in 1954, 8 years later, finally, they got the first blooms out of those little baby seedlings. And then in 1962, maybe something else happened. Anyway, maybe I've got the wrong order, but those 8 years apart, 1948, 1954, 1962, look it up and learn what happened. But this is a miracle because it's the first, not this particular one, but the type of crossing a tree with an ordinary herbaceous peony. It's like crossing a horse with a mule or a donkey to get a mule. And the mule is sterile, and I don't know if these are, and that was a lot easier for the horse and the donkey than it was for Mr. Ito to get the tree and the herbaceous to combine. But that was the miracle. We have, I think, 13 now Itos in the garden, at least 11. It's on the directory, and I am actually just showing a little bit. These directories are on Facebook. That's the right side up. And all 230, exactly 230 plants are in the directory, updated for this summer. So go on Facebook.com. This is going to be glorious as well. Lovely rose. The plant will look just like a rose. We're going to see a rose form pretty soon. There's forms of the blooms. A rose form, a single, a Japanese, and there's anemone. I don't think we have any yet. And then you go to the semi-double, and then you go to the bomb, and then you go to the double. There's 6 kind of evolving forms of the flowers, of the complexity of the flowers. And it's fun to know. Here's the tail end of, this was our first bloom, May 14th, actually. I have a picture of a beautiful bloom on May 14th. Here we are, June 5th. So there's still a few little stragglers hanging on. Bless their little budding hearts. And it's early bird. It's properly named early bird because it's one of the earliest flowers. So you're seeing just the tail end on June 5th. Here's an original peony right here. This is, they get Latin names, Paeonia officinalis, tenuifolia rubra, double. Double isn't Latin, but it's a double flower, and they aren't going to bloom because it's too new, so they're just kind of resting there. But the plant is going to be great. It's going to become, this is an original. Species means that it is not hybridized. It's from thousands of years old. So let's move on. This is a beautiful example, and it's just making its way. This is A number 1. Please, everybody, respect that this is a unique addition to our garden. We put it in last summer, and it came from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where they have the Nichols Peony Garden. We are the only official public garden west of the Mississippi dedicated solely to peonies. So that's a big deal. But this particular peony was brought from China in its root form, which means it's still an original form of however it came from China. And it came in about 1967 during the Cultural Revolution. And somehow it made its way to the United States and has been very cared for in Michigan. And a friend of ChinWon, Reinhardt, ChinWon being one of the 2 named people, and you can see in the plaque over here, the Reinhardts. And the Reinhardts are coming down to see the garden here in a few days. And this A number 1 peony came from ChinWon's college roommate and high school best friend. And she, Mi Young is her name, is still living in Michigan. And she sent a pot with this flower because it's special to the family. And it's from special friends. ChinWon and Mi Young being high school classmates and coming over to Ann Arbor, Michigan to finish their college educations or continue their college educations. And they met Howard Reinhardt and his roommate, who were doing doctoral math in the University of Michigan, at the University of Michigan, and the 2 girls were working toward their degrees, and somehow they met. And so the roommates met the roommates, and now they're still all living in their husbands and wives forever, and it's just fun. So this flower will honor that we know a little bit of its history. So it's a very historical flower. Golly is just for fun. It's brand new. We had to put that flower in here because we had Margaret Truman here last year or something, I believe, and it bloomed and it wasn't Margaret Truman. And that happens. So we want to be true to what the names are, and so we couldn't tell what it was, and so it's hanging out somewhere else.
It wasn't Mrs. Dewey.
Whatever happened to Baby Jane, maybe it was Baby Jane. This is a beautiful flower that will come in a week or so. Here's some Reinhardt peonies from their garden, and these are their own peonies that they love and have loved forever. And these are the whites, and they're very fragrant, and there's 3 of them, and they're coming in a week or so. And then there's reddish pink or pinkish red coming. Here's another species peony. We have only 6, I think, species peonies in the whole garden, and that's one of the types. And species, again, means original. Japanese fern leaf singles. So this came from Japan. Doesn't it look like it would be happy in this sort of monsoons of the times when they get all that rain? Maybe that's the advantage of these little leaves. They don't just get all matted down, they just shed water. This will be a plant, we planted it last year, Early Scout. It's meant to be shorter on the corner than the taller ones. Sometimes it goofs up and we get a really tall one in the front, but this is another herbaceous. So fern leaf, herbaceous, and tree I mentioned in Ito. Here comes another Ito. This is therefore foliage that dies all the way to the ground in the fall, and it goes to sleep. And it should say Ito on the, maybe it doesn't, but it is. And you can tell that it's Ito because it doesn't have trunks. The herbs, you can see last year's husks, but they're not going to send up a shoot. And you can see that the leaves, it has the leaves of a tree and the stems of an herb, but they're stronger because of that cross with the tree. So I'm pretty sure that's one of our Itos. I could look it up, but I'm not going to take the time right now. This opened up yesterday, and if you come around the other side, I think, oh, take a picture first maybe of the label. Old Rose Dandy, so a little bit like Gauguin in color. This is more the rose form of a flower. beautiful color. Here's, well, any of them are good. So they're kind of the center. So this is probably still, you know, it's harder to classify the trees as singles or Japanese or whatever. So I have to look that up, and sometimes we don't even know, because there's gradations, right? There's always a continuum of how the flowers evolve from hybrid to hybrid. But that is another Ito plant, because you see these sharper pointy leaves and the strength of the stems. And the other telling thing of an Ito is that the blooms, the same as in a tree, that's why I know that's an Ito over there, by the way, on the morning lilac. But here, Old Rose Dandy, is that its name, has these little pointies on the, so they have the buds also of a tree. The trees are budding with points, and you can see here the herbaceous is, and look at all that licorice sugar for the ants if they want to come up and get those sugars. You don't need ants to make the peonies open, they just coincide. They love the sugars, so about the time the bloom is going to open, the ants are going crazy to get those glossy sugars there. Also, this is an interesting factor. Here's another herbaceous peony. I think it's going to be double, but and very beautiful, but the buds, what was I going to say about, oh yes, the multiple buds per stem. And so some of the hybrids make only one bloom per stem. And that's a characteristic of that plant, with an occasional bonus, sort of a reverting. But the lactiflora is the name. And I won't probably go into full detail about why it's a funny name for a multiple bud per stem, but it's like a bouquet on one stem. It can be, and these are, and these are. So you're going to get 4 or 5 blooms. If they all bloomed at once, it'd be a mess. The whole thing would drop dead, kind of to the ground from weight. But the lead bud is usually the tallest, or the one at the very end of the stem, and that will open first, and then the side buds get a chance. And they're usually a little bit smaller, and that's not a bad thing, but they will have the same form. So this you start to see again, I'm sorry to go back to this, but that sort of rosy kind of quality, that is a rose form. It's not considered one of the, like if you look at the sign over there a little bit, you see the 6 forms of flowers: single, Japanese, anemone, semi-double, bomb, and double. The next time we get together, there'll be some bombs that'll be in, lots of doubles and several semi-doubles. There's quite a few actually, anemones in the garden. And the anemones are more advanced. The inside is starting to be like petals instead of the stamens, the pollen stamens. And I have to do more studying on whether or not they are fertile or just become floral, period. So moving down, this is my favorite, coming very soon to a garden near you. This is Paeonia peregrina. And to peregrinate is to travel far. The peregrine falcon might go 100 miles in a day just to get some lunch. They kind of go distances. It might be just part of their exercise program. But this flower is going to be a beautiful single. I'm going to go over to the sign, because on the sign is actually, we chose, because we love this flower and we love this plant. This is the flower, and it's thousands of years old. It's like a dandelion in Turkey. So this British botanist in 1750 found this particular plant growing on the hillsides. Like we have balsam root and lupin in the mountains, they have this, what came to be named Paeonia peregrina, because it peregrinates. And by that we mean not that it travels far and wide, because it's got its own roots, but it sort of lays out and makes a wandering kind of draped look. But that's its characteristic. And that color is just, you can't imagine it wasn't hybridized. Let's go around the corner, because this one that came open yesterday. So the peregrina was found in 1750, and it was brought to England. And then by 1768, Mr. Miller, Philip Miller, I believe, had not hybridized it, but just cultivated it and nurtured it and kept it going and was very pleased. And it was so good that he was able to register it, even though it's not a hybrid. He registered it as approved, you might say, by the British horticultural whatever for peonies in 1768. So it's our oldest peony registered in the garden, and it's also a species. Even though it looks like a hybrid, it is a species peony, meaning it's like a dandelion. It's an original. So we should have such dandelions in our yards. This is a yesterday surprise. Salmon Dream just opened up maybe 2 days ago was the first bloom, and suddenly it's just fabulous. We had Salmon Beauty over there, if you look in the distance, and Salmon Beauty is that first double to open. This isn't a double, this is, well, it's still, I think, categorized as a single, but I'd have to look on my big list here to be sure what other people categorize it. I don't. So, but these qualities are just great, and the color is fabulous, and it's, again, just like having a bouquet. And that's why we appreciate everybody leaving all the flowers for everyone, because each plant has its character. And as they share their beauty with us, and oh, here comes a yellow swallowtail butterfly, yay. We've noticed lots of bees just hanging out. This just opened yesterday, Coral Charm. This is another herbaceous peony, just gorgeous color. Again, in the coral or salmon or, you know, non-red, not pink, just that other quality. And Coral Charm, we're going to see a coral sunset opening up over here if we keep moving through. This is Gary Clark's favorite flower in the whole thing. It's not, the next time Ron comes to do some video for MCAT, we're going to see several examples. Last year we had only 3 blooms, and a peony thief took one of them and cut it off with a beautiful diagonal floral cut. So we think that person knew better, because they also knew how to cut without ruining the plant. But they ruined it for everybody else. This year we have 19. We are counting. We will keep counting. We have Christmas Velvet. This is a fabulous, we just saw it in Caldwell, Idaho. It was the most vibrant color in the whole garden. It just like was iridescent and fluorescent, and in the sunlight it just like burst out to the whole world. It was an outburst of color, and that's coming soon. Here's a tree, Vesuvian, and so this is an early blooming tree. I think it might have been our first, well, our second or third, but again you see the trunk down underneath. So that's the characteristic of a tree. So these are originals. This one is absolutely original. This is like a first generation hybrid off of probably that as possibly a parent. You could almost think it's like asparagus. It's so wispy and so ferny, fern leaf. And so this fern leaf, it's called tenuifolia, and tenua means kind of thread-like, like a needle thread kind of thing, something thread-like leaves or something like that. And again, we have seed pods, because this was already blooming on May 14th and May 17th. We're documenting them on individual photographs as they come along. So these are species and hybrid, but you can see the relationship. Pretty much red grace, I mentioned, is a favorite flower. It's just incredible. It looks like it's just going to be a confused cabbage or something that's going to come out, but it isn't. It just will open up, and you cannot believe how incredible that flower is. It's possibly the most striking form in the whole garden. The bees are already agreeing. This came out, again, Scarlet O'Hara. This one's ahead of the one up there, but they all have their little characteristics. Maybe the soil slightly different here. And again, this is a single. Almost all the early blooms since May 14th and May 17th, buds May 12th, have been singles. We're just getting our early first doubles, so you'll see lots of singles. Here is another tree. This had a beautiful single flower last year, and already it's got some that are done and more that are yet to come. Hephaestos, we call it, if we're pronouncing it close to correctly. And this flower, I'll sort of show with my hand that this is hand-sized. They're monsters. They're just amazing. And they're very vigorous. So once you get a tree peony like this, you don't have to do much except keep it going. This is our first year to get blooms for Sarah Bernhardt. It was growing quite okay last year, but now it's happy, and it's letting us know. So we've got labels for every plant, and we're asking our patrons to not step into the garden like I do, because I've gotten to know where every little kinnick, by the way, is our ground cover. And the deer this winter just decided it was a tasty winter treat. So it's kind of coming back from being chewed back, but we think it's going to get better and better, and it's going to help the weed situation and sort of shading and keeping moisture and all kinds of things for the plants. Some of our plants have struggled still, but we're encouraged that this one had some dieback this spring from some fungus, and then it just sent up another set of shoots. And if it likes it here, it may just be fine next year, because some of the ones that were troubled are just perfect this year. Another herbaceous peony. Here we have Honor, and it's coming to an end, but it's already been a beautiful bouquet. And again, singles. So there's the pollen, the stamens, and the pistil. And I think that's the right term. And so the seed pods are already forming. Here's some that are just already growing. And we have a friend, our friend in Caldwell has hundreds of peonies, and she has a whole bunch of seedlings that she just likes to see what the bees do. And the bees make new plants. But we're going to keep them so they're coming up from their authentic roots. This is mahogany, which is another herbaceous peony that has an incredible, last year it had a couple flowers, and look what it's doing in its third summer of blooming. Just amazing. This is an Ito. This is one of the most famous Itos, and we'll see it in a week or so. And this is Bartzella. Bartzella is just one of the early Ito hybrids, 1986, but that's not that early, really. If you consider 1954, everything was starting to happen with the Itos, named after Toichi Ito, the guy who he never saw a bloom. That's why I'm thinking he may have died in 1954, and then the first blooms happened in 1962, something like that. I'll have to review. Everybody's free to go and correct me on the internet. And go to our facebook.com, Reinhardt Peony Garden. You'll get lots of great tours of the blooms. Even in the middle of winter, you can go and see what the blooms do in the summer. These are a gift from the Stickney family, who are friends of Howard and ChinWon Reinhardt. And we are pretty sure, Gary's positive, in fact, that these are Festiva Maxima, but we will know in a week, because they're really blooming for the first time this summer. And they're planted in this meager soil. We just had some room here, and we just threw them in. And they're just saying, well, if you threw us in, we'll grow. And this is amazing, because this is Paeonia brownii. It's another one of our species peonies. And this is the one, please everyone honor that it's unique. It grows, there's one of two peonies that grow in the Western Hemisphere as natives. And this plant is native to Oregon, Washington, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and Northern California probably. And there's only one other peony that grows in the Western Hemisphere without anybody ever having done anything, and that is Paeonia californica, I believe. It's California, and it's up in the Sierras or the foothills, but it won't grow up here, and this won't grow down there. This has to have, guess what, we're at 3,200 feet here. This is supposed to be 3,000 feet or higher. So we just made it. And that makes this peony a unique addition to the garden. And also, by next year, we're hoping that it'll have these little pendant flowers. They're not decorative. It's just a native plant. So we're thrilled that it's coming. This is 2 trees, I think, in a row. This one is on its end. And this one hasn't bloomed, or maybe won't. No, it will. It has some tiny blooms right now, but they keep getting bigger. So this is tree, see that pointy bloom, and that the Ito also has those pointy buds. The pointy buds, I should have said instead of bloom. Coming down the path here, this is the Mackinac Bridge, we called it in Michigan when I used to live there. I think they say Mackinac Grand. 1992 is the date of registered with the American Peony Society, and that means it was probably hybridized for 20 years or 15 years before that, and then they have to make sure it does what it needs to do before it will get registered, and also to propagate enough roots to start sharing them with the world. Fabulous flower. And again, it's officially a single, but it's getting more than just 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 petal guard petals. It's getting like a healthy number of petals, and it's just big. Wonderful flower, beautiful color. Mackinac Grand. This is another example of Scarlet O'Hara. So it's got 3 different plants in this garden because it's beautiful wherever it is, but it's also budding out and blooming out, I should say, at varying times. And again, this is a single. It has the pollen, and it has the stamens and the pistil. And the guard petals take care of it until it's ready to be reproducing, which is its purpose. Here's another. I started to say lactiflora. I'm going to tell a little bit about it. I know it probably makes Ron crazy to have to try and edit this for the TV. But this means multiple bed. To us, it means multiple buds per stem. And look at that. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the lead bud will go first. And already some of the side buds are getting ready to burst. And it's just happy as it can be, even though there's only 2 stems, or maybe 3 this summer. And that's fine because it's just getting itself established. Like this last year maybe had 2 flowers, and this year, look, this had maybe 3 last year. And now every year it gets a little taller. These aren't supposed to be above 36 inches. So we're not suggesting people should come and shear them off at 36 inches or no one will enjoy them. But this, lactiflora, means multiple buds per stem. And it comes from the idea, lactiflora means white flower. And this is anything but white. This is single bud per stem. So that's that nice other quality that happens sometimes with an occasional single side bud that could bloom. But here's a traditional lactiflora. Lactiflora was so named because in China, the ancient parent of all these hybrids, you could say in a way, the very common parent is the lactiflora original species Chinese peony. And that lactiflora is all it means is white flower. Again, lacta, like milk, the color of milk. And flowers that are white have nothing to do with this other than the characteristic of the lactiflora, the original Chinese herbaceous white peony, which was valued only for its medicinal qualities at first, like everything, gout, I don't know what all, sore stomach or something. But its characteristic was to have all these blooms coming off each stem. So as a parent of all these other hybrids, that quality of multiple buds goes into the hybrids as well. Here's another tree coming, and it's got its beautiful bloom, tree peony purple. It's so original in a way that it doesn't have a name, like, because it isn't a hybrid, and it isn't a named peony, but you can get in there if you want to catch that. And it's, again, a pretty large flower, and I think maybe it's our only flower this year. And this has already been hanging in. Some of them hang in for a day and they're done, and this one sort of hangs in for several days, and there might be another bud. This is the first day of coral sunset. So it, again, has that coral charm was the one up there, but it has that coral color. And this will be also, I think, a complex single, meaning it does have, look at that bee, just happy to not sting me at the moment. I love that little guy. Yeah, sure, help yourself. So the by the way, this garden is incorporated by default, you might say, but also with much pleasure, into the State of Montana Arboretum. The entire campus of the University of Montana is designated as the State of Montana Arboretum, and therefore they plant native things and native trees. And for one thing, we're very happy we have the Peonia brownii, because it's a native plant. Truly native to Montana, not just to the United States. So this is great. This is not native anywhere, but it's so beautiful. That color is just remarkable. Even the beauty of the bud opening up is just like as pretty as can be. It's Sue Talbot is on our committee, for those who know Sue, and I think it's her favorite flower, coral sunset, in the whole garden. So I'm going to have to take a picture for her. This is the first year Kansas is going to bloom. So I guess this last year the peony from Kansas was not, or named for Kansas, wasn't sure it belonged in Montana, because somebody said, Dorothy, this isn't Kansas. And so now Kansas decided it's happy in Montana. So that's cool. So several more coming, buds. The big thing of this garden this year, if you just do a panorama of the whole garden, is that you can see just like a sea of buds. Last year there were a few. This year it's just like a farm, a bud farm, kind of. It's just prolific. So moving toward the end of the garden here, we have, this is the first year of purple spider blooming. And purple spider is, I should look this one up to be sure. I think it's an anemone. I will look. What number is it on the number? D.
333.
Okay, it's not anemone. Must be a, well, I'll learn more. But sometimes you get contrasting colors in the middle. The guard petals will be different from the petaloids. To me, this is an anemone because these are now petaloids and not stamens anymore. And the stamens just have pollen on the end, but now these are getting frilly like petals. So they're petal-like stamens, you might say petal-like stamens, in effect. So the guard petals and the inside are the same color. They don't have to be, but that should be an anemone. I bet it could be a Japanese, though. Let's see. What number again was it? D?
30, yeah, 32.
You know what? It's one of the ones that isn't categorized. We have about 50 that we didn't find the garden, the nurseries giving it a quality. So we'll look that up. This is our end of the garden, as far south as west, I'm sorry, as it will go, and it's tree peony coral pink. And that's a little bit just a name. It's not like Harold Brown or anything like that. It's what just describes what it is. It's a tree peony, and its color is coral pink, coral pink. And its form, again, is something a little bit on the cray papery side, the tree foliage, and the tree trunks, if you want to call them that. Here's a pretty nice example here. That's kind of a fresh bloom, you might say. And something fun to notice is that some blooms don't get very far away from the foliage, and other plants, they want to come out and kind of be away from the foliage into full sun. Some random but hopefully helpful information. So there's ethos and trees and herbaceous and species. Those are the four types. Species means original. So if you see a plant that says species on the label, you're looking at something maybe thousands of years in existence. So that's wonderful. And often those species peonies become parents of the hybrids because they have such enduring and endearing qualities. So that's that. And then you start looking for the simple flowers that are singles. Most of the early ones that have bloomed here, but others coming still also will be singles. And then you look for increasing complexity where the inside, the stamens and the pistils begin to become like petals. And then you get, so you move in the direction of something called single. Then Japanese is a little more elaborate because something's happening and it tells on the sign. And then the anemone is starting to have like purple spider, I think. Over here is an anemone. And then moving on, you get to the semi-double, so that's starting to, the guard petals and the other petaloids are now the same color or the same blend. Maybe colors can vary. And then you move to the bomb, which we have none yet, but we will next time, which is like this poof, comes right out of the middle of the flower. And finally the double. The double is the most complex and probably the most naturally beloved. But this garden has such great variety. It's already looking fabulous. In a week, it'll even be more fabulous. Again, more than 190, I would guess 195 plants will bloom, and probably 175 different varieties, each unique. We have many plants that are only one of a kind in this garden. So it makes sense to come as often as you can, or go to facebook.com and look for the garden, and you can get to see them by pictures if you can't catch them when they're blooming, because they'll be going from mid-May, May 12th, to July. Probably the last faded bloom will be July 8th or something. Okay, so welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your support. Thanks for interest. But look how the sun makes those colors pop. Or even just that little bouquet over there, that little garden.